Welcome to The Art of Growth. I'm Joel Hubbard.
I'm Jim Zartman, and today we are talking about from startup to stabilization to scalability.
All the S's.
I love alliteration. I've always loved some good alliteration. But We're talking through our book, Hunters, Farmers, and Teamers, about the instincts. And we did an episode called What Instinct is Needed Now? And we're talking about that there's different contexts that happen. So if you're out there and you're interested in starting a business, owning a business, maybe even having a side hustle, or you're running an organization or a team, and like, where are we now and what needs to happen now? I think this little framework helps to understand how things naturally grow, how they function, and what happens when you don't have this kind of instinctual lead or instinctual energy leading a different aspect. And so one of the chapters in the book we lay out in a most simple context. When companies start, or when any new initiative starts, a new idea, there's usually some good hunter instinct energy that's, I see the possibility. Mm-hmm. I know there's woolly mammoth over that hill. I know that there's something over there that we should explore. There's an adventure to be had. There's something, new possibility. And they usually need to then go, okay, we found an opportunity. So now we need to stabilize. The startup has happened. We need to stabilize. We need some farmer energy to come in here and create the systems and structure that can harness the potential of the thing we've just discovered. And that can often get to a certain point, but until you bring along the teamers, you don't have the capacity for scalability. How do we make this expand and bring on more people and the right people and collaborate with the right other kind of teams or organizations, whatever, to grow this thing to a point where it can have the kind of impact that we dream. Mm-hmm. And so that's the basics of the framework that we're talking about here.
Yeah. And we're talking about people, not necessarily the structure that needs to be in place for scalability. That it will leave up to the experts in that field. Yeah. We're definitely not trained for that. But
sure.
But still, what we're talking about are the people that can help with those roles, but who represent and have those instincts to help grow the organization from the standpoint of, again, the people. So you talked about the hunters and the farmers right at the beginning. Almost always hunters draw these farmers at the very early stages of these organizations. And by the way, this applies to everything, including your own growth and development as a person. You are going to go through the same thing. You're going to go through producing some kind of change in your life. It may not start with hunter. For some of you, you're going to be more of a farmer and you're going to be farming, and say then you'll go to the teamer and you like to bring in people and like to work with people. But then you're going to have to bring in that third, because if you don't, then it will stifle your own personal growth. And we've talked about this. This applies to the organizations and it applies to the country. It applies to politics as well. We need to have all three instincts for growth in the healthy version of growth. How do we grow in a way that produces some good fruit, some good results? And for organizations, as you said, the hunters start out, farmers usually are right there with them. But what we've noticed is that it's always the third one that gets people. It's always the third one that is the stumbling block for us, that prevents our capacity to really thrive. And we get caught in sort of these loops of like, I do the hunting and then we have farmers that help us to make that happen.
Yeah.
And we don't stop hunting. We just keep hunting. And then eventually that wears out the system. The system can't continue to do the same thing all the time. And so I've noticed these loops, even in reverse of that. I've noticed farmers who like to work in a social environment within a group, and that turns into its own loop. And there's no change. We don't want to have any changes brought into the organization. We want it to stay the same. We like the stability. We like the collaboration. Let's keep it that way.
Yeah. I kind of laugh at the way our company started, because you had this thing you were interested in, and then I was like, here's how we can bring it to a lot of people.
Yeah, right.
So I'm the teamer, you got the hunter thing. And because of that, the first 2 years, there was no kind of company or there was no way for people to even contact us. Like
I know that
the first
funny.
2 seasons. And it was like, oh, well, we should have a website because we had no farmer really coming into play.
Yeah.
Or that awareness of that need for that farmer instinct to be like, hey, if you have something of value and you can bring it to a lot of people, there should be something that they can actually tangibly take with them or interact with us. And we didn't have a single product. We didn't even offer coaching. Like there was nothing on the radar. And it's really funny that you can actually generate a lot of energy around something or interest in something, but then like we were missing that component.
Yeah.
So it's whatever component is missing is the thing that's going to limit the impact that you're actually able to have.
Yes. Maybe that's where we go a little bit, is to explore that and talk about these different loops that'll exist within organizations. Because you just mentioned that one with the hunter and the teamer. But it would be the same if it was the teamer and then the hunter, because you'd still have all this excitement around like, okay, we've got a team, we've got a lot of activity going. This is great. We're enjoying our time together. But there would be no way to scale that because of the fact that it's missing the farmer instinct. And so you would have nothing but just a lot of great times together.
There became a point where we couldn't sustain the great times because it was demanding a lot of time, but it wasn't covering any of the costs of that time.
That's right.
Because we didn't put that in place. And that's what happened to us. We're just kind of like, oh, well, we actually need to generate income for the amount of time being demanded of us, because it's like cresting past the point of this can be like a hobby that we do on the side, because it's like, oh, goodness, there's so many people.
And nurturing even what we had. Like, you know, we're the ones that'll go out and throw a net down, catch a bunch of fish. And then we're like, great, let's do that all over again. Then it's throw down another net, catch some more fish. That was great. Let's do that again. Why are we hungry? And why is there nothing? It's like, well, we don't do that part. That's the downside to having all of that, but no ability, and organizations find that like no nurturing structure. So you go back to your clients. Is there some kind of system that allows them to feel like they're part of what's happening? It's not just like I was brought in, or I became a client, or I became a customer, but months go by and there's no touch points. I want to feel like I'm part of something, like I'm wanted, like I'm being updated on what's happening. There's some communication coming my way. These are things that typically farmer and some teamers will do, but it really is that thinking about the loops. Like you can get caught with the hunter, teamer, hunter, and the problems that will occur. And generally it will be around those things of like, do you have a structure? Do you have a way of nurturing what the customers, the people that are in your circles? And that's, I think, a big challenge for those that get caught in that loop.
Do you think there is a farmer-teamer loop?
Yes, very much. The farmer-teamer loop is, I've seen this with individuals, but I've also seen this in certain organizations where they do groups, their organization's great. I mean, in terms of like, people feel valued. People feel like there's structure. People have a sense of clarity around their roles. So you might take something like an insurance company. Right? You're going to have probably a little bit of that. You could have that. You could also have, maybe some farmer hunter, but it depends on the organization and the kind of people that are running it. You could easily have a farmer teamer kind of structure to banking systems where that's going to show up. You're going to have that in the health industry. These are the sort of places where that can show up, where there's very little change taking place. And that is the thing that ends up wearing down because there's no fresh input, no new ideas, no changes that'll produce any sort of growth.
I follow a couple people on, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, where they're people who buy businesses that are people wanting to sell their businesses. And they were talking about the number of boomers who have had stable, steady businesses for the last 20, 30 years, but they want to retire. They have no one to hand it over to. And so these people are coming and they're going, wait, you have a steady income stream? you have a business that's stable and you have no website, you have no real online presence. I mean, these are like mechanic shops, car washes, like all kinds of like daily use businesses where these people are coming in and they're buying them pretty cheap because the other person, they just want to turn the business over. They want to sell it. They can't keep it up. But it's lacking all of this hunter instinct where there's like the modernization. And because it's such a everyday use company and so many of their clients have been around forever, they haven't needed to. They have their unit and they have their system and their program. Everything's fine. And then this person comes in and they're able to 10x the business because that's their goal when they buy the business is to make it grow because they bring all this influx of hunter energy when they buy out the business. And then they put them on the map and they give it a new look. They freshen it up. They give it a gimmick and they give it a online presence and they give it some social media and they give it anything to kind of boost it. And automatically it becomes a more profitable thing.
Yeah, that's that mix. I think it would also be true reverse. If it was teamer farmer, you're going to still have the problem of the third, that hunter being, absent. Yeah, you get a lot of social justice organizations that have that stacking. Very teamer farmer. It's like, we value the people. We care about making sure people feel supported, that we're together. And then, of course, the using the sort of resources and structures to combat the injustice, but very little change in terms of like, how do we go out and produce something new, bring something new in. So they do have a hard time sometimes even selling themselves because it's based around justice, but not based around that sort of warmer, more exciting kind of energy that the attractiveness of that,
transmitting is like, come check this out. Like, hey, look how great it is over here.
Right. So that's going to happen there. For me, I think what I understand it to be is that it's the neglected one. That's always the one that it's not so much like, what does that pairing produce? That's really interesting too. But what are the limitations will always be that third one. So teamer, farmer, teamer, it's the hunter. That's going to be the challenge for them.
Yeah. And I don't know why, but it's very, very seldom that we tend to see organizations that balance all three.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, and I don't know why it is, most skew towards one and then utilize a second to support that one. So we talk about this in the book with peoples. We individually, we tend to have a dominant, we have a secondary, and there tends to be a blind spot. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on like why organizations tend to reflect that same kind of pattern where they tend to have one that is not as developed or utilized, even in these mega companies, we're talking about, we work with companies that do $1 million, a couple $1 million a year, and we work with a company that does almost 50 billion. It's still the same thing.
Yeah.
We still see that pattern at play.
Yeah. And I do think systems reproduce after themselves. So you think about how they began, it's very difficult to pivot. The way they started, particularly if they had success early on, it becomes the magic that they want to protect. Well, this is what's always made us successful.
Yeah.
So they'll even go back sometimes to going like, let's go back to what made us once successful. It's like, well, good luck because everything's changed. And in some cases, yes, some organizations lose, say they started out as a hunter farmer. And then by the time they get to a certain size, now they're saying, well, we just need more of that sort of farmer, maybe teamer combination. And so they might go to that. And then they slow down in growth. And we need to go back to what we once were like. And so they go back to the hunter. And they try to, generate more growth that way. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But what we do is we value what once worked and we can overvalue what once worked so we can stay stuck in that. That's one of the reasons. The other thing is the levels of sense of competency. Like I think we all feel individually incompetent usually when functioning out of our third instinct. Well, I would imagine organizations feel the same way. It's a sense of incompetency, but it's also a sense of I just don't see it. I don't think the answer is all that mysterious. It's like, do you know about this teamer instinct? It's like, well, sure, I know what team is. And then when we talk about it, it's realized, oh no, it's funny that I know what you say and I understand what the words that are coming out of your mouth, but I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know how to implement that. This happens all the time to us. We'll type an organization, and they now know their types. They can even describe each other's types. But then in behavior, what does it look like? It goes right back to the way it was before, with like, I'm still asking you to be like me. I still think that this is the way to move forward. One of the team members said to me, even though we had this thing, my boss, who knows all about this, was very much a fan of what you guys did, still said to me the other day, you need to be more self-promoting. And he's a 3. And it was like...
The boss is a 3.
The boss is a 3.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, my type doesn't do that. So it's like, okay, you can grow in articulating more about what it is that you're doing, for sure. That's the part we want to be better at. But a lot of the things in the evaluation he gave you is very much based on his type, not the awareness of how to make you a more successful version of your type so that you can benefit the organization in a greater way. And same thing with instincts. I understand that the teamer exists, but say I'm teamer blind, I'm still going to function primarily out of my other 2. And that is where the challenge lies, I think, is in getting you to understand that there's that instinct and then learning how to find that instinct within you and actually see it inside you. Not so that you'll ever be great at it or super competent at it, but so that you stop being blind to it in order for then you to advocate for it, even if it isn't your first 2. And when you advocate for it, then it stops being a blind spot in your organization.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I've experienced this on the personal front where when something has been my blind spot and I became more aware of my blind spot, I either resist it and ignore it until it becomes so much of a problem that then I actually forget all of my own giftings and don't bring them to the table because then I default to the thing that I didn't have. Then I see that it was causing a problem. And so that overreaction or overcorrection can take place as well. Mm-hmm. Like, what weren't we doing enough? Well, that's what we have to do now. Yeah. And so then sometimes people who aren't good at it try to do it or feel like they need to force themselves to do it.
Yeah. Or
they then just turn over the organization to someone who's really good at that at the expense of the thing they already did well.
Yeah. So that's really important to say is you're wanting to include the third instinct because it wants to support and serve your dominant instinct. That's the way it should work for every organization.
3 legs of a stool.
Yeah. It's not that, oh, now I need to overcorrect and go the other direction. We need to go all teamer because we were lacking the teamer. And now we're going to go full on teamer.
Right.
It's, even organizations will do, the boards will do this. It's like, well, okay, instinctively, they were not even aware of the instincts, but they'll hire a teamer because that's what the organization needed. Mm-hmm. We need a person that's a real team player that thinks team. And so they listen to this teamer articulate team and they're like, you're the person. We're going to hire you and you're going to fix everything in our organization. Well, then that's a really hard thing for the organization to absorb because it's a foreign instinct and it is now being overcorrected and pushed in the other direction. That doesn't work. But it's like, in what way can the teamer now serve the fact that we're much more of a farming organization? How can we do that? How can it help? What's the hindrance right now to our growth and our sense of, well-being as an organization? What's the hindrance to that? Well, if it's the teamer, then that's the part you want to include, but you don't become a teamer organization. You include it, and that I think is the big key thing is what is being excluded because we're blind to it that's preventing us from growth. And usually it's that third instinct. And so,
but I think that's the right question. Like, what is currently being excluded? What are we not doing enough of? Like, which of the 3 legs of the stool is the loosest or shortest right now? We can't get this thing any higher because that's what's being excluded the most. And then I think it's also that how do we integrate that or pour more of it in there, not turn it over that way, and we suddenly have to become that.
Don't lose your identity as an organization. Yeah. You've got to, like I tell these leaders, like, there's a genius behind this. It's the thing that motivates you. You love this thing. Don't give up on it.
Right.
It's just that you're over leveraging it unawares and therefore blind or under leveraging something else. Again, your identity is much broader and bigger than you think it is. And that's what's usually when you bring in the third, then it's, oh yeah, this is who we really are, and boy, do we thrive when we're doing that. But we're still going to fundamentally have the feel to us of a farming organization, even if we include a little bit more teamer, and we should, and I think that that's important to do so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I told a couple weeks ago, I think I told the Nokia story about how they got so big. At one point, it was like, yeah, we've got that hunting instinct. And then we've got the farming instinct. We're able to build all the infrastructure.
Yeah.
We were able to scale. But then there's something about the size of an organization and the group. There's a certain density that something reaches where the leveraging has to work in a different way. Because I was thinking about this with another organization we've worked with, which is there was so much hunting going on that once they reached a certain size, the hunting turned inward. They were basically like hunting against each other.
Farm animals, yeah.
So you had so much of that energy going on where they became internally competitive instead of externally competitive. And there wasn't enough of the externalization of that very energy, which tends to go look for new opportunity.
That's really an important thing. It turns in on itself. All three instincts. If it doesn't do the thing it's supposed to do, it turns in on itself.
That's a really weird component.
It is.
I think that's of all the things that has surprised me the most so far, it's that piece.
Yeah.
Of when it gets to a certain point, it becomes almost cannibalistic.
It's cannibalistic.
Its own capacity.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah. Well, some have said it this way, and I think I've added a couple pieces to this, but it becomes anti whatever it is. It's like the farmer that starts to consume too much, the farmer that starts to overdo the land and it's run out of nutrients. It starts to do things that are not smart for the farm. And the hunter that's starting to hunt farm animals instead of hunting the woolly mammoth, you hunt so far from home that you can never bring anything you catch back. Yeah.
I think that's what happens.
But when it in the teamer, you think like teamer, how does it turn in? Well, it can become like, I don't want to be involved. I just want to participate, but I don't really want to be involved in any fashion of like guidance or direction or
it becomes the internal club instead of about its like external mission.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's interesting. That's a really good one with the Nokia of like turning in on itself as the hunter instinct. All three instincts have that capacity of implosion.
Yeah. I think I wish I would have included a little more of that in the book, because in the book I talk about like basically external competitors, and you didn't have this element in there and it came in. But the more companies I look at, the more you see, it didn't get destroyed from outside, it got destroyed from within.
Yeah.
And that happens when you have like the overusage or over-reliance on one that becomes so preeminent, you don't have the balance. That's almost, internally destructive. And then you have two and you don't have the third, and it's more likely to be externally destroyed.
Yeah.
So that seems to be the pattern that is emerging the more I look at like some of these companies or things where they tried to do something in it and it went really wrong.
Well, they are meant to live together as both a harmonizing, but also a balancing and also a re-energizing. I think that's the piece. You can imagine, a hunting organization that doesn't really pay attention. It uses the farmer to keep to keep making things happen, but it doesn't integrate the farming to go, you know what, we need to kind of breathe. We need to not press the pedal to the metal. We don't need another big kill, right? So rather than opening up a new store somewhere else, can we not do that this time?
Right.
And I think that is where the integration, where one serves the other. Or like you've been farming the same land, you need to go somewhere else. You need some change. Or you're burning through so many people, And how about you learn to work well and develop people and really develop them, champion them. I had one hire me to say, definitely a teamer. Man, this guy's such a teamer. I met with him, first time I met with him, CEO of his company. We're merging, bringing in another company, and it's big changes that are happening. But he seems to be pretty energized by that whole thing. So he's like, big stuff is happening. We're merging with others. But I have this right-hand person, and this person is burning out. Could you coach them? Worth every penny, just whatever. I don't care what the cost is. If you can help them, I'm happy. I'm all game. It's like, okay, you realize as a teamer, like that's a really important piece. Developing what you have. Don't swap it out. Don't change it. Don't develop it, nurture it, keep it going. That I think is where you start to see like, okay, that's where the instinct can really serve that hunter or that farmer. And that's why they re-energize each other. That's why they bring in something that the others are missing. So it balances, it harmonizes, but it also re-energizes, I think, the other instincts.
The more we're talking about this, I really want, if you haven't listened to the What Instinct is Needed Now episode or haven't read those chapters together, like really try to take a look at that as a whole and understand how all of this works together. Because I think we're still learning about it. And if you have ideas or things that you notice, observations that you make around some of this or examples that you have, like please send them to us so we can learn how this works together. Because the whole point is there's a greater mission and purpose that we're trying to be a part of. That's what we're talking about with this year in general, this idea around our purpose that we're here for, what we're trying to bring to the world. And so we're trying to mitigate as many of the things that can get in the way of that as possible. If we're going to do that, we need to have the observations of being aware of what are the most likely things to ruin what you value and care about and are great at and have to offer, right? So that's what we're trying to figure out. That's what we're trying to solve. So let's do that.
Sounds good to me.
Yes. So thanks for listening. You can take the new Hunters, Farmers, and Teamers assessment on our website, theartofgrowth.org. That is our new instincts test. And you can order the Hunters, Farmers, and Teamers book on Amazon now. The link is in the show notes. Based on our interactions, we are also adding content to our Instagram about the topic, which is just Art of Growth. And the best way to support the show is to leave us a review wherever you listen and share this episode with someone else. We're hugely grateful for you doing this work with us. Grace and growth, my friends.